In his book, Creating the Quran, Dr. Stephen Shoemaker rejects both the Islam-friendly, non-critical analyses of the history of Islam and the nationalistic approach to the history of Islam. His critical, historical approach actually gives us a version we can all talk about in an honest way. In the last couple of episodes, we talked about the tendency to have censorship at the field of academia, especially in Western academia, where, to be honest, it's confusing to me because the West is known for open-mindedness, for people to have the freedom to express their opinion. Yet when it comes to the Western academic field that is focused on the Quran or Islam in general, the tendency to always to sanitize anything that is critical against Islam, which flies really in the face of what we call academic work. In other words, there is some censorship even at the field of academia. And we did address a number of quotations, as we have been doing in the last few episodes, from Shoemaker's book. Some came directly from Shoemaker himself, others quotations he himself referred to in his book when it came to that censorship or suppression that I called insulting, to be honest, to Muslim minds and even intellectual capacity in general. But my question today to our dear brother, Dr. Jay Smith, who is with me here in studio to unpack all of this, is the following. How then can we proceed from here, Dr. Jay?
Well, we're going to get to that. And before we get into that, I'd like to just bring up one more aspect, and that is the other side, because Shoemaker takes on both the problems of Smith's idea of speaking within Islam. It must be a believer's
Wilfred
approach.
Smith, right?
Wilfred Smith, yeah. That takes on, he confronts that, but he also confronts the other, and that is the naturalistic approach. The naturalistic approach starts from the premise that you must eradicate any belief system, which is the other extreme from the other side. This is J. Samuel Peirce, however you pronounce it, writing in 1987. He talks about this, and this is what he says. Naturalism must be understood without the benefit of clergy, that is, without the magisterial guidance of religious authorities, and more radically, without conversion or confessional and or metaphysical commitments about its causes, different from the assumptions one might use to understand and explain other realms of culture. It is not necessary to believe in order to understand. Indeed, suspension of belief is probably a condition for understanding, is what he's saying. So this is almost like the opposite of what Smith is saying, Wilfred Smith is saying. And that is that you don't want any influence of belief on what you're going to be studying. Now, Shoemaker says that there's a problem with this as well. You don't want to go to either one of the two extremes. He says, this rejects the idea that religious phenomena cannot be understood and explained using the same methods regularly employed for studying other aspects of culture and society, is what he's saying on page 11. So when you're studying history, basically is what he's saying, and I agree with him on this. When you're studying history, you do have to see how religion impacts on the believer. You do have to see what the believer is saying. You also have to see what is it that history can tell us concerning that believer's approach. Historical context is absolutely important, and you need to have the believer's context to understand what was happening to that person in that place. When I look at Abdul Malik, why did Abdul Malik create the Quran that we have today, or start the creation of the Quran that we have today? What was his impetus? You need to know what he was confronting. You need to know the milieu, the believer's milieu. Most scholars believe it's because he was starting something from scratch. You and I don't believe that. I think we were very clear that Abdul Malik was actually a Christian of sorts, but he was an anti-Trinitarian Christian who was confronting the Trinitarian formula. But you need to know that environment. You need to know that the milieu from which he was talking. If you just throw that out and say we don't have to know that we must, in fact, don't use a believer's belief system, because that will cloud out, or that will contaminate the record. No, it doesn't contaminate the record. It actually embellishes the record. It actually informs us and informs the reality of what happened on the ground. We need to know why certain people did certain things at certain time in certain places. And if you pull that out of that and try to be completely secular outside of that environment, you're not going to understand the historical context, nor are you going to make sense of then why something as important as the Quran, for instance, had to be created, why it had to be written. In our context, what we know is it had to be written because of a need for an identity, to have a religious text for the Arab people in the Arabic language, for in the Arab environment that he created.
Mm-hmm.
Abdul Malik is the one that created that environment. So if we were going to throw that out and not even look at that, then why will we know why the Quran even began? How can we do this? And so Shoemaker's making a very good criticism here, and I would agree with him. This is something that we need to do both ends. Don't take either extreme, for heaven's sakes. Be informed by the extremes. I don't have a problem with Cantwell Smith trying to make sure that what he says is from the believer's perspective, but that is not historically accurate. At the same time, don't just take it from a completely secular environment that dispels and disputes and dismisses everything that's religious. Bring the two together and find out really what was happening historically. Or as we have always said over and over again, follow the evidence that's on the ground. It's as simple as that. History demands that. But it also demands that we must make sure that we understand who is saying what they're saying. Listen, we do that with biblical studies. Whenever you look at what Paul says in Philippi, what he says in Corinth, or what he says in Ephesus, or what he says in any other city, isn't it interesting that we always want to see what the environment is to understand the context of why he's confronting the whole issue of women in the church in Corinth, but he doesn't do that in Ephesus. So that was a particular problem for Corinth, but it was not a problem in Ephesus. How would we be able to understand that unless we understand the context?
And exactly. And I don't want to jump ahead here, but just to give you an example, I mean, technically speaking, let's use the field of the Quranic studies, and especially the critical text, meaning you want to trace back the origin or the original, let's say, Quran. You need to do a forensic, basically, analysis. Forensic demands that you follow the evidence, that you keep tracing evidence all the way back to, it could have started it right here. And if that's the case, at least based on my finding today, this could have been the origin. Now, tomorrow, someone might come in and discount all of that I said and find other things. But it's always tracing it backward. Here, it seemed like, Dr. J, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is like a dividing line, meaning like this is the sin or the standard Islamic narrative line. We're not going to exceed it. We're going to start from here and move forward, not backward.
Yeah, please do that. Now, in the next episode, we're going to actually unpack what Bruce Lincoln does. And Shoemaker purposely pushes forward Bruce Lincoln's.
And that's Bruce Lincoln that he mentioned in his book.
In his book. Yeah. Bruce Lincoln, who has 5 theses of what we should do. To really do it accurately, why don't we follow these 5 theses? We're going to unpack that, and we're going to give then Shoemaker's response to that. But that's probably a much more adaptable paradigm, a more realistic paradigm, and obviously historically accurate paradigm.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, of course, for joining us. As always, I will remind you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Sierra International, and also consider becoming a member of our Patreon group. And that's always helpful to us, of course, in first broadening our platform, broadening the number of people who are members that can take our work and spread it in their own immediate sphere. But also it's helpful in terms of its support impact as well on producing such fabulous video series for you. As always, we want to thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments, and we welcome any feedback that you can share with us. We always welcome constructive also criticism, and I mean it because we get a lot of insults, and it is what it is, but we always look for constructive criticism that will be of benefit, not just to you, but to the body, everybody else that is watching this as well. As always, also, we want to thank our dear guest, Dr. J. Smith, for his contributions to this series and his fabulous analytical mind, where we go through a document, in this case, this book, Creating the Quran by Stephen Shoemaker, and we're analyzing the content for you to really sensitize it for you and dissect it, making it easier for you to understand what is this book all about and why it is something that we're encouraging you to go and buy, so that at least you are aware of what to expect when you have that book in your library. Thank you, Dr. J. Thank you, everyone. This is Al-Fadi. God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sierra International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.